everyone. Welcome to the Law Firm Reboot podcast. My name is Nick Werker. Now, during this podcast, we'll be featuring recordings of panels that took place live at Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. Before we dive into that recording, I wanted to briefly let you know a little bit about the camp's host, Answering Legal. For those not already familiar, Answering Legal is a 24/7 virtual receptionist service that exclusively works with the legal industry. Whenever lawyers can't get to the phone, our highly trained receptionist team is there to make sure they never miss the new client. Answering Legal now even integrates with your favorite legal softwares and provides a free mobile app. As a thank you for checking out our podcast, we're giving you a special free trial offer of Answering Legal, which includes an additional $300 off of services. To take advantage of this offer, visit answeringlegal.com, book a discovery call with our team, and just let us know you watched our Reboot podcast. Please note that this is a limited time offer. Now, without further ado, let's get to our panel. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Answering Legal's 2024 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. Now, as explained earlier, all of today's panels at camp will be legal tech focused, and our final conversation of the day will be discussing how to be more successful working remotely. Joining me for this conversation is Allison Johs, Elizabeth Warren, and Patrice Asimakis. I'm going to kick it off. So this one is for everyone, and like we just talked about, I'll call on somebody first. But I'd like to start off today by giving each of our panelists the chance to briefly introduce themselves, to tell us a little bit about themselves and the place where you work. So I'm going to start with Allison Johs. If you would be so kind as to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about Legalese Consulting.
Sure. I'm Allison Johs, and I am the president of Legalese Consulting. I help lawyers with what I call sort of the business side of their practice. So everything from productivity to operations to marketing and business development. And I started the consulting business after having practiced law for about 15 years and decided to switch gears. I couldn't get away from lawyers, so now lawyers are my clients. But I still have my toe in the legal world, obviously. So that's it. And then I also, with some other lawyer friends of mine, including my husband, started a mediation company last year. So now we own a mediation company that serves basically the New York City, Long Island area. We're looking to expand. We have about 26 neutrals on our panel. So that's been another different experience this year.
I do appreciate that you referred to your husband as also your friend, because I would hope that my wife also refers to me as her friend. But thank you for that wonderful introduction. Elizabeth, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself.
Everybody, Elizabeth Warren. I am one of the co-founders of Gavel Law, which is an Ohio-based family law firm. It's a virtual law firm where we have about 20 of counsel right now that span the Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati area and the surrounding counties. Law is actually my second field, my second professional field. So I started off in education and higher education administration and worked as an intercultural specialist and taught at Stanford University and Ohio State University, and then came to law through having my own custody case and realizing and feeling that there should be a better way to access law and to understand the law and to empower clients. And so I built my own private law firm on those foundations and tenets and about what it felt like to be a client. And now we're building, Stephanie and I, the other co-founder of Gavel, are building Gavel Law as to what it feels like to be an attorney and how can we support both a tier of clients as well as attorneys in work-life balance and to have a very robust and affirming work experience that hopefully lessens burnout.
I would like to lessen my own burnout, so that's after my own heart. Patrice, last but not least.
Nick, great to be back on Summer Reboot. Thank you for having me. I always enjoy talking to you. My name is Patrice Asimakis. I am a lawyer. I went to law school back in the 80s, so I've been at this a long time. My previous practice includes both litigation and corporate law. Today, I am the Director of Legal Services at The Law Company. We're an alternative service provider that provides either on-demand or subscription services to lawyers all across North America. Most of our clients are small to medium law firms, a lot of solos as well. And we try to help them sort of level the playing field a little bit by providing a complete back office. So any legal research and writing at all that needs to be done, briefs, memos, deposition summary, interrogatories, you name it. If we don't do it, we have learned to do it. We have very bespoke services. So just a way to help small firms manage the ebbs and flows of practice.
I love that. I feel like that's like the true actual work force you need in order to like be a lawyer that can actually back up law offices.
You know, when I came to this company 6 years ago, I didn't really even know anything like this existed. They've been around for 20 years now. And I was just fascinated by the business model. So I love what I do. And I love helping lawyers. And like both of you who have clients who are lawyers, all of my clients are lawyers. My clients are not consumers. They're all lawyers.
My clients are all lawyers too. So we're birds of a feather here. So this question's for everyone. I guess I'll call on people, but what are some of the greatest benefits an owner of a growing law practice might see from making the shift to working remotely? And whoever looks like the most, I guess I'll go with Patrice. Patrice, you look like you're ready for this one.
I'm ready for everything. I'm always ready. I'm very interested to hear what my co-panelists have to say about this because they're in a little bit of a different space from where I am. So I'm really interested in what they have to say. I guess I can boil it down to flexibility, cost, the talent pool, and productivity. And to elaborate a little bit on that, flexibility. I mentioned that I came up in the 80s. Having a family and managing personal things back in those days, if you didn't show up at work at 7 and leave at 7, you didn't get very far back then. And it was rough. I'm grateful things have changed, grateful for my kids. But even before COVID changed everything, I started working remotely. And for me, it's a great fit. I think you kind of have to know thyself, what's going to work for you. But, growing law practice, if you offer that flexibility, that's a huge plus. Cost, we all know that, without an office, less overspace, less operational costs. You can, there are all kinds of places where you can lease remote space. We have remote spaces in different cities. They're really affordable. They will help you on board. I think the most important thing for us, though, we love the ability to expand that talent pool. We have lawyers everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And it's a global economy. Part of our mission and vision is to be able to, the exact words are tap into the intellectual capital of the world. We want to be able to get that talent from everywhere. So, I understand for my kind of business, it's a lot different from a law firm. You have UPL considerations. And so if you want to go broad beyond your jurisdiction, you have to deal with, the unauthorized practice of law. However, as we all know, there are some states who are moving towards changing that. In Utah and Arizona, there's been some changes in that. So, and I think we're going to see more changes, but you can really, really expand your talent pool. And then I think when it comes to productivity, I know for me personally, and I think a lot of people would agree, you want to be happy. You want to be happy. And if you're happy, you're going to be more productive. And I'm happy when I'm comfortable. And right now I'm comfortable. My home office is very comfortable. I think as long as you foster an environment of trust and accountability with your people, with your staff, they'll be comfortable mentally, physically, emotionally, and you can really create a really wonderful environment.
I appreciate that thoughtful answer. I'm gonna pass off to Elizabeth if you could give us your insight on what you think the shift to working remotely.
Purposely, when I first broke out into law, sought an office because I felt that I really needed that structure of a space to go to in order to help me organize my day and life, work-life balance. And, quite frankly, COVID changed everything. But as far as my own personal perceptions of what that looks like and how to remain productive. So I think that one of the greatest benefits really is said flexibility, but really the ability to be authentically myself in a more real way, that trying to cram something in a 9 to 5 and getting all the tasks done and then transitioning to home and then having all that work to do as well. It was kind of a false dichotomy, right? Because we get phone calls at work about home stuff, phone calls at home about work stuff. And while I still very strongly believe in work-life balance and don't think that you should immensely bleed those two worlds together, I do think that there lends itself the natural flexibility to be able to take care of home items or home issues without that feeling of guilt or being pulled in 1,000 different directions, and feeling like you are not available or accessible when and where you need to be when those things arise. So, we try to predict what our calendar on a day is going to look like, right? Like we try to understand what this week is going to look like, but the reality is in real life, it does not follow that schedule. Things pop up and you have to be able to be moldable and flexible and adaptable to what that is. And so, for example, this morning I had a hearing and it was a 15-minute hearing, but it was 2 hours away. The court would not allow us to appear by Zoom. So I'm not just going to sit in the car for 2 hours, right? So how can I utilize that time and space to take care of some things safely, in a way that, keeps things moving in a more natural, seamless operation. But still, it's very important to have a time off, right? So for me, it's a stop dead timeline where I say, I'm done with work and now we are going to just be, whatever that looks like.
It's such a thoughtful answer. I appreciate that you gave the example of like, it's 2 hours away, but how do I be mindful of my time? So I'm curious. I obviously want to hear your answer, but so Allison, what do you think are some of the greatest benefits that an owner of a growing law practice might see from making the shift to work remotely?
I think they both hit on them. If you looked at my little notes, my bullet points that I wrote down, the two of you hit on every one of them. The flexibility, the idea of the increased talent pool. Not just broader in terms of the area, right? Because if people don't have to commute, you can go further out. But also when you have a virtual, you have a broader talent pool in terms of people who might otherwise say, well, I can't take a full-time job because I have to be home to get my kids off the bus. So a little bit of what Elizabeth was saying about being able to figure out a way to meld the personal and the work in a way that still works. And one of the things that Patrice said struck me also about the culture aspect, right? About people feeling happier, they feel more comfortable. But that also translates into more loyalty to the firm, right? I mean, a lot of people are moving around more than we used to back when, I started practicing law in the early 90s. So it was similar to what you were saying, Patrice, in the 80s. It was like you were supposed to be there from 7 to 7 and people didn't move around necessarily as much as they do now to different firms. And so one of the challenges that firms have now in keeping people is keeping them happy and keeping them loyal to the firm. And so allowing remote work or hybrid work, if that works better for the firm and for those employees or those lawyers, that engenders loyalty. You're taking care of me, I'm going to take care of you. I'm not necessarily going to be looking elsewhere because I know I have a good deal here.
So before we can talk about like success, I want to talk about barriers to success. So what kind of unique challenges does remote work bring for lawyers as opposed to traditional in-office working environments? Like what's the difference? What's really the drawback, and why should we sort of endeavor to move to like a work from home model? And I guess, I'm going to call on people again. We're going to go reverse order. So we're going Allison.
Okay. So for me, the two main things it comes down to are access and communication. And maybe those are in some ways the same thing, right? So when you're not seeing people, when they're not walking past your office every day, you're not seeing them sitting at their desk, sometimes, and some of this depends on how big the firm is, you forget about the people who aren't there, who aren't in front of you. And so sometimes that can be a challenge for lawyers who are working remotely, because they might not get the assignments, or they might not be top of mind for, to be put on a team to do a certain project, or with a certain partner to get some kind of work. But communication, like I'm working with a firm now where I did a whole survey, anonymous survey with them, asking what some of their challenges are with hybrid work environment, which is what they have. Some people in the office, some people who are remote, some people are a combination of both. And there were a lot of things that came up about communication, about, how are we communicating? How often are we communicating? What method are we using? Some people like email, and other people like the regular telephone, and some people like Teams, and other people like Zoom. And so a lot of the feedback that's coming in is there are too many channels. So now it's taking me a lot of time to check all of the channels. This one likes to text, that one likes to email. Well, do I have a Teams meeting? And now I have to remember how things work on Teams versus on Zoom, or whatever other different platforms you're using. So I think those are some of the things that, especially if you were originally set up as a law firm that was an in-person law firm, to change to remote or to hybrid, there's a lot of things that people may not have thought about. And those seem to be the biggest barriers that at least that I'm seeing. So I'm interested to see from the two of you what you guys see, and especially Elizabeth, you're living it. So
I laughed at everything you said, specifically because I manage a work from home team. But yes, I am very interested. I will not give my 2 cents yet. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. You go right on ahead, please.
No worries. If you have 2 cents that can resolve those issues, I welcome them, because I really resonate with the struggle of trying to find different channels of connection and to keep conversations fluid and ongoing and moving forward. And, to Allison's point, dealing with people's preferences and whatnot can be really challenging. There's lots of ways to access people, but at the end of the day, I think we're meant and built to be in community. And so I think that sometimes when you are in isolation, that in of itself can cause some real barriers and challenges, both on a personal level and also on an infrastructure level. And so some of that is, how do you create that, or how do you replace kind of the natural vibe and exchange of information and ideas when you are passing somebody in the hallway 10 times a day, right? And you're not doing that on a virtual basis. And so, those are the kinds of challenges. How do you do relationship building? I have over 20 attorneys that report under Gavel. As of right now, we're rapidly expanding, but I'm not confident that they know who each other are, right? Because there's a direct report that's virtual, and there's no common space where that community can be developed. And so I think that is a real challenge, because with that comes shared trust, being able to bounce ideas off of each other, growth within the company. You can easily do much more, like training, let's everybody meet at noon on, and we can meet at the lunchroom, whatever it is. I mean, I think that a lot of that kind of natural exchange gets lost, and that spontaneous exchange gets lost. So how do you replace that? And can you replace that without just having people staring at each other in a Brady Bunch Zoom box all day, right? So that doesn't work. So, I think there are real challenges. And so no model is perfect. So, you're not ever going to resolve every issue or every barrier, or every challenge, but, you look at what are the priorities. How do you utilize the strengths of the team members that you have, and how do you mitigate some of the deficits in a way that tries to bolster the strengths and tries to create new avenues of work and dealing with each other that helps that. But there's not going to ever be a perfect system that fits everybody and every need all the time. It's not possible.
So I just want to stick my head in here for 2 seconds, but my entire team besides myself are remote, and I encounter this problem basically on a daily basis because we have so many channels that we manage in order to communicate together. We have our task management platform, we have our CRM, we have Slack for instant communication, we use Google Meet to meet and exchange ideas, and all of these technologies that we use in order to like share ideas together works well for a small team. So I'm curious how you guys, and especially you, Patrice, because I'm going to let you speak next, but how you combat that. Like, what do we do in order to get that sort of that in-person feel while we're working remotely?
Yeah, I would love to answer that, Nick. I agree with Allison and Elizabeth for sure on some of the barriers. I would add before I jump to, fostering that environment that we're looking for. I would add to the barriers, not all lawyers are created equally when it comes to technology. And so I think that, you could face some tech challenges. They're not insurmountable, but, you need to go in with your eyes open. And then I also think an obstacle, if you're going from a brick and mortar to remote, if you're making that leap, you might have some compliance questions because you may need different enforcement procedures for sensitive data. So those are just things to think about. But when it comes to, team building and those kinds of things, I hear you. I mean, we have 300 or more employees worldwide. I mean, it's not a small team. Within the company, there are smaller teams for different, verticals, but overall, there are a lot of us. I hear what you said about communication channels, Allison. Who do I WhatsApp this person? I message that person. We decided a couple years ago, this is the single source of truth. Everybody's on this. That's helped a lot. I mean, there was a transition, to get everybody to do that, but having that single source where everybody's expected to use that will help. Standing video calls, weekly, bi-weekly, this team get together and you log in and you talk to each other. And it's a Brady Bunch, sure. We have occasional in-person events and a firm might be a retreat. My husband just got back a couple of days ago from his yearly firm retreat. That's a good way to just get together occasionally. Doesn't have to be all the time, but just, make sure it happens regularly. It doesn't have to be once a week. It can be once a month. It can be once a quarter. We have a very large team overseas, and we have something called an annual day where we celebrate the anniversary of our company, and that takes place overseas, and it's once a year. Not everybody goes to that, but a lot of people do. So that's a really fun event. We actually have clubs, movie club, book club, and they get together once a month, and that helps a lot. Going on right now, it launched today and it closes tomorrow, is a scavenger hunt. And so our learning and development team it's really fun too. Like I was looking at the questions like, oh, I can get that. But it's fun. And it gives you an opportunity to really interact and engage in a completely different way, learn about your colleagues. You learn things about your colleagues and you develop these friendships. Internal newsletters are another good idea. As a lawyer, you might not want to take your time doing that, but that can easily be delegated. So internal newsletters. And then I would say something else that really engages employees is just small recognitions for a job well done. We have something called a spot award. So if I know that one of my team members went above and beyond or stayed late when she didn't have to or whatever, or made the client extra happy, whatever it is, send it to HR, send out a spot award. It's just a little attaboy. So, I think there are things that you can do to make remote work feel different.
I love your answer. I'm curious what you guys, Elizabeth and Allison, have to say on the front of how do we overcome the challenges that we're discussing. And I'll go back to you.
About an HR team. It's a business run by two people. There comes in size certain challenges as well. But I think that some of the ideas that Patrice had are amazing in what they implement in that company as far as, the spot awards and whatnot, and trying to have that personal touch and trying to make the big feel small. And because we are in kind of a growth period, we're trying to make the small feel big. So it's, so it's kind of a different mentality and mindset. But I think just having the real me show up with the real you show up, and we have open and honest conversations about what their barriers are, and can we help and aid cross over some of those barriers, or is this something, because we are transitioning a lot of attorneys that haven't worked virtually, although our firm is virtual and is in conception was virtual. How do we help them switch their mindset? So, we have two kind of coupled challenges, which is not just the virtual switch, but also we are unbundling services and doing things on a scope by scope. So we're flip-flopping a lot of the ways that people access and understand what the legal field looks like and what access to law looks like. And so, I think that those challenges, walking with the attorneys is helpful, offering to be there, offering assistance, offering, understanding, and also offering to sometimes say, we don't really have all the answers, but let's try some creative solutions, and also letting go of things that don't work. Right. So we may think that there's this great policy or this great thing that we want to initiate. We launch it, and then it just is a dud or doesn't take off. And so, knowing when to let go of some of those things that were part of the initial design or concept, but that, and as we see it in practice, really don't function the way we anticipated. So I think it's just, for me, really, it's just about being present, and having that open and honest communication with the of counsel that are working with our company, and not expecting them to necessarily pick up on the technology right away. So what can we do? So, I worked with Scribe, and Scribe is a tool that you can, it screen captures your processes, and then it catalogs them and organizes them. Just things like that, technology can offer some assistance with that, but it is not an entire replacement to it. Right. So, fostering that connection is really important in our company.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, sometimes you have to try things and see if they work, and they may or they may not work. And you also have to understand that, as you said, okay, you can create certain things that might be a supplement. So like Scribe for training people, but you still want to have that conversation. You need to have that one-on-one discussion. And whether it's over Zoom or you do some of these things in person, like maybe when you're onboarding somebody, there have to be some in-person meetings starting out, because even on Zoom, you can see the person, but you can't see as well as when you're sitting in front of each other to see if somebody's really picking something up or they're not really picking it up. And I think the regular meetings, even my clients who are not remote, I try to encourage them to have a regularly scheduled meeting, either with their assistant or with their whole team or with their whole firm or all of the above, so that everybody's got it on their calendar. They know when it is, they can plan around it. But it gives you that regular communication, and it gives the other people, so if it's your assistant or the other people on your team, they know that they're always going to talk to you on Thursday at 4:00. So there's not so much anxiety about when am I going to get to you. And as I said, that works even when you're not remote, because you may be there in the office, but you've got 9 million things to do, or you're running out, or you're meeting with clients. And so the people that you work with have questions and they never know. And then they're standing outside your door while you're on the phone, So if you have those regular meetings, whether you're remote or hybrid or in person, I think it really helps. And I think doing the social things too, but there's kind of a fine line there. You don't want to make it like the forced fun. Everybody has to show up for this event and then people resent it. So, what I've tried to do with some of my clients is to tell them, maybe some of these social things you need to do during the workday to the extent that you can, So yes, it means that maybe they're quote unquote unproductive hours, but I don't see that as really unproductive. I see those in-person interactions and getting to know one another as really important to the culture of your firm, which also translates to how the people in your firm treat your clients. So, saying you're going to do everything after hours, I don't think is the best option. And a lot of people just don't have the opportunity to do that. So if you do them sometimes during the workday, and if you think about it, when everybody was in the office, you would walk by somebody's office, you would stop and ask them how their weekend was, right? Or what have they been doing this summer? And you have that little chit chat. But that, as we were saying earlier, that's a hard piece to duplicate in a remote or even a hybrid environment. The other thing that I've had some of my clients try, especially when you're talking a smaller firm where the access, we were talking about one of the barriers being access, is like there's one partner and then there's maybe a couple of paralegals or maybe an associate and, some other staff people. The partner is the one that everybody's looking for access, right? So maybe they have office hours. So then they might be remote office hours, but that person is always available at this time. And so I can hold my question until noon on Wednesday because I know that the partner is going to have office hours from noon to 2 on Wednesday or whatever it might be. So that's sort of your open door policy that you would have when you were in a non-virtual setting when everybody was brick and mortar, all in the same place.
So I'm very close with one of my aunts, and she always tells me stories from like back in the day. I forgot to mention, that she was a corporate lawyer for a very long time. Now I think she works for some sort of technology company, and remembers the days where like you never there before email, so like you'd have to run a note or a memo up to the partner, and I'm just like, wow, that you're old. No, but what I mean is we watch how technology evolves over time. Where when they first got email, she said it was rude to send a partner an email. Like you would still walk up a memo and hand it to them in person, or like it was rude to send a fax, and how cultures change to adopt technology. So it is funny how that kind of applies to remote work, right? Like now we're remote. How do I get access to a partner? How do I get access to this person? So I'm curious, Patrice, what technology do law firms need, or like what's table stakes in order to be successful working remotely when it comes to a remote law firm?
Sure. Yeah, I have a lot to say about technology. Before I get to that, I think Allison raised a great point, and I do think that access is really important. Before I get to technology, we are currently consulting with a new firm that is launching a remote, brand new, somebody who left another firm and got a bunch of his friends, and he's launching a brand new, fully remote firm. And we're consulting with them. We're doing a lot of project management with them. I think maybe it's a total of 5, 7 lawyers, not a lot. And we're very process oriented. Every client we have, every type of work we do, there is a best practice guide that gives you the process. Not that that's a replacement for the partner, but sometimes the reason that you need to get to that person is because you just need to get inside of her head. And so if you can document the process, that could obviate the need to get your hands on that, like get the FaceTime with that person. So I would just say that, process documents, I think, are vital. When it comes to technology, that's sort of where I live, and I love technology. I always have. I've used a lot of it. We've been using AI since probably 2018. It's nothing new. I would say to start, and this sounds really basic, but do you have a good website? I mean, and it sounds like such a basic thing, but you really need to have something that's lovely and professional. There are lots of developers out there. You don't have to hire a fancy firm. You can find a single, guy on Upwork. So do you have a website? Next, how are you communicating both internally and with your clients? We just got done talking about email. I'd be surprised if no one's emailing. I don't know. I'd be surprised if there's still holdouts, but you probably already are using, Google or Outlook or some form of email communication. So great. Is that internal only? Is that how you communicate with clients? Do you need to have your website include a portal for your clients to log into for communication? These are assessments. These are not really my recommendations, but what are you doing and where do you want to go? How are you storing files? There's NetDocs, there's OneDrive, there's Google Docs, but you need a secure repository to store your files so that all the right teams can access them. So website, communication, how you're storing files. As far as collaboration goes, and I think this is really something that's underlying this conversation for all of us, and it's really driving, how are we collaborating with one another? I think it's really important when you're all working remotely. It's not like back in the old days, and, Allison, you sound like you're almost as old as I am, but we had a room in the firm called the War Room. And it was a conference room where you went to hunker down with your people, The War Room's gone. So how do you collaborate? Well, there are all kinds of really good collaboration tools out there. There are virtual whiteboards. There are project management tools. We've used a couple of them. Some project management tools are specifically for litigation, like Clio, Litify, MyCase, I think Smokeball. So some of them are specifically for litigation. Some of them are specifically for transactional lawyers. Like one of my favorites is called Deal Closer. So that's a virtual closing room. So there's technology, not really very expensive. You just need to do some investigation. Billing software. How are you billing your clients? Depending on your area of practice, do you need any kind of automation, e-discovery, contract lifecycle management, contract review tools, litigation workflow, all these things. And I'm not at all suggesting that, oh my gosh, if you're going to go remote, you need all these things. That would be like terrifying. But you just need to do some kind of internal assessment to know what your vision is, know what your clients are expecting. And when it comes to clients' expectations, we talk about this with our clients a lot, and know your client, because you don't need a portal. You don't need to spend the money on a portal if none of your clients are going to want it. My dad's 90 years old. His lawyer better pick up the phone and call him, period. He might be able to handle Zoom. He would never be able to handle this kind of video call. He can't. His lawyer has to call him. So you need to know your client and know what your client's expectations are before you go out on that limb. But I just think that really a good assessment of what you currently have and what your vision is will help you sort of narrow down. There's so many things out there. And like I said, we consult with our law firms all the time to help them. It's overwhelming. There's so many different cloud-based document management tools and so many different billing softwares, and they sometimes come to us and say, help. Once you sort of narrow it down and you really fine-tune and tailor it, you realize I really only need these two things. But getting there sometimes is part of the struggle, just narrowing it down and getting to that point.
My next question is for Elizabeth. And this, to me, I'm super interested to hear your answer because, so, like I said, I manage a remote team. And some of my former, I guess they're not former in-person colleagues are now remote colleagues. So if a law firm is interested in leaving their physical office behind and becoming all remote, what does that transition process look like? That terrifies me to ask you this. But like, what are the stages that need to happen in order to successfully transition to being remote?
A little bit of step back from that question, because Gavel Law, on its inception, was meant to be all remote. So it's very different. We never had to transition into that. That is what we are, right? That's how we engaged in the process, how we engaged in our marketing. We were very thoughtful about who are the archetypes of the clients that we want to attract, and then do our marketing materials as well as systems match that kind of persona. But what I would say, since I had my own personal law firm for about 15 years, that my personal transition, really I would have had to deal with what are things that are the benefits of being in person and having a brick and mortar, and what are the things that are the benefit of being virtual, and how can we migrate the best of both worlds in a way that that provides a seamless experience. But I'm struggling with the answer. Maybe I'm terrified to answer the question, but I'm struggling with the answer because, I think that if we were a law firm, a traditional brick and mortar law firm, and had to then transition to virtual, we would have to be very mindful about what that process looks like. How do we mark that with our clients? Are we grandfathering in certain clients that we're going to just keep as keep a brick and mortar until their cases are closed or concluded? How do we introduce the new technology and techniques as we go more virtual, or as people go more virtual? And I think that the real struggle is then, when you go virtual, to Patrice's point, my parents would certainly not enjoy a virtual law firm, right? So it also inherently changes the clientele that you are reaching out to, and it changes the more technology you get embedded in your systems. It also inherently changes the expectations from the client's perspective. And what I mean by that is, we were talking about email. It would be rude to, just email a partner. You'd have to walk it over. The more technology that's integrated, the more expectations that things will turn over a lot faster. So, even emails are too slow, right? Don't leave a voicemail because that requires them to put in a button or whatever to that's just somehow inherently annoying, right? So, how do we create those communication lines, not just with kind of a supervisor-supervisee relationship with managers and the of counsel, but also between the of counsel and the clients, and then the managers with the clients, to ensure that everything is communicated and captured. And how can technology help with that? So, one tool that we integrate and use is Hona, which is a communication tool that when we type out a message, it goes straight to the person's text. They don't need a portal. They don't need a special login. It's adherent to privacy concerns as well. And it also captures it in our CRM, right? So we are also capturing the legacy of the communication so we can stay up on top of that. And so, I think that, just really trying stuff out, consider things as a test run, and, before you dedicate yourself to those systems, ask for a 30-day trial on different things, integrate it, use test cases, use test people, see how it works, be open with the different companies that you're trying to integrate with about where you're at as a company and what you're trying to shift. But there is absolutely a change of the clientele when you go from brick and mortar to virtual, 100% virtual. And, I do think that that's something that, you need to be prepared that there's going to be a drop off of certain populace that's just not going to want to be virtual. But you also gain a lot of access to people that really don't want to have to take an hour out of their day to drive to your office to have a meeting with you, when they can just go on their phone as they're walking to get their Starbucks. Right? So it's that kind of vibe, and that kind of, I would say it's almost like a deformalization, if that's a phrase, that the kind of really stuffy brick and mortar, everybody's in a suit and tie all the time, is really changing drastically. And I think again, I keep going back to authenticity, but, I think that if people always see you as separate and above, or separate and somehow elite or special or what have you, then that free flow of information and conversation really is hindered by that. And so I think it's about the access, the ease of access, but being very mindful and very upfront and realistic about turnaround times. Because the other thing is, as soon as people realize they can text you back and forth, they think that you're available at 9:30 on a Friday night to talk about the fact that dad didn't bring a blanket to an exchange, right? So, you just have to be mindful about those things as well, and maintaining those boundaries when you can and when you need to.
So this is a really good segue, and I want to leave with Allison. So this question is for everyone, but how can attorneys better handle their client experience when that experience is mostly remote?
So it's interesting because from my perspective, this this might be the easiest piece of being remote. That's just based on my experience from when I was practicing. We didn't see our clients in person very much unless we were in court. You know, it was like maybe the initial meeting, and then everything else was really remote, even though we were in a brick and mortar office. We would call them on the phone. That was how most of the time we would communicate. It's not like if a client had a question that they would show up in your office. So, but I would say that there are, because of the technology, and frankly, because of COVID, and because even the clients who maybe used to come to your office don't want to, that there has to be a discussion about expectations. How are we going to communicate? So just like you would with your internal team, you know, and Patrice said, okay, we did this, this is it. This is our one source of truth for the, you know, for the company. This is how we're going to communicate. You know, you have to have those conversations. That should be part of the initial consultation with the client. This is how we typically do things. You know, you can expect, you know, X from response time, and this is how we communicate. We have a portal, or we use this program where you'll get a text message, and these are the hours that you can expect to get a response from us. And, you know, all of that, setting expectation and having that conversation with the client, I think, is really important, and understanding sometimes what works best for the client. You know, you don't want it always all to be just that you're dictating to them. You know, you want to have a conversation with them too about what works for them, and also depending on your practice, right? If you're in a divorce practice, it's things like, well, who has access to the technology that I'm going to be using to communicate with you? Whereas before, if you were picking up the physical telephone and you were, you know, that was how you were communicating with your client, unless somebody was picking up an extension, right? You know, you were only talking to that person. Whereas with all of this electronic communication and access, and, you know, who can pick up the phone, who's got the password, are you sharing email accounts? You know, so I think those are the kinds of conversations that you have to have with clients. But one of the things that strikes me just from this conversation is that when we say a virtual law firm, it doesn't mean just one thing necessarily. So for Elizabeth, because she may have lawyers that she's working with who are outside counsel who are all over, maybe all of their appointments are virtual, but you could have a law firm where everyone works remotely, but they still do in-person meetings with clients, whether that's in, you know, a virtual office space, or whether they go to the client to meet them where they are. So you have to think about, what does your virtual office look like, and what do you want that experience for your clients to be? And there isn't one answer to that question. So I think to keep up the client experience, first you have to have an internal conversation about, what is our firm, what does this mean for our firm and for our clients? You know, and again, to me, it comes down to communication and access too. With this, that's the client experience. They want to know that they can get to you when they need to get to you, and they want to know how that's going to happen, and when they're going to hear from you. And you know, so some of the same challenges, but just with a different twist than you would have if you were working brick and mortar, I think.
What do you think on this topic, Patrice? And I'll ask the question again for listeners who might be joining late. How can attorneys better handle their client experience when that experience is mostly remote?
Yeah, Nick, I mean, Allison and Elizabeth nailed it. I don't really have a lot to add. I mean, I really believe that communication is so vital. Talk about client expectations. We've already talked about knowing your client. You know, if you sort of combine, what are your internal policies? How far are you willing to go? What do you tell the client to expect? But then you have somebody who's like my 90-year-old dad. You know, are you willing to, for those clients, go, you know, okay, we'll maybe do something a little bit different. As far as just an overall experience, I mean, this has nothing really to do with being remote at all, but clients want to feel like they got a good value. I mean, I think that goes without, it doesn't matter if you're 50 years ago, today, remote, not remote. And so don't let that go. You know, even though when you're focusing on all these tips and tricks and advice to have a good remote working environment, they just want to feel like they have a good value. And part of that can be accomplished by staying in touch with them. Because even if you get a bad outcome, I mean, sometimes some of that's out of control, right? If you get a bad outcome, let them know right away.
Yep.
They're going to want to know that communication, stay on time, stay on budget. Simple things like that aren't really specific to the remote environment, but sort of, I think, support it in some ways, also lend to that overall experience. But again, the communication, I just think it's at the top.
So we're coming up on time, and I want to ask, if our campers are interested in connecting with you further, how can they do so, Elizabeth?
Email me at Elizabeth, ELIZABETH, at Gavel, and we spell it GAVVL.com. And I'm happy to talk with anybody, particularly if you're in family law and going remote, because there are no winners or losers in family law, to be frank. It's just mitigating the loss and damage as much as you can and being attentive to the process. I mean, I've lost cases, but have had clients be extraordinarily satisfied because I was their advocate for the process. And I helped empower them with the knowledge that they need to make the best decision for themselves in that circumstance. Because I'm certainly not living with them when they're done with me, right? And I need to make sure that like the Hippocratic Oath, I'm not doing it more harm than good by either over litigating or overstating, positions or what have you. And so, if anybody is interested in how to manage family law remotely with that personal connection and touch, that I think that is a core element that is vital, because that's where the trust is built.
Allison, I believe, if I'm going in my reverse order, you're up next.
Okay, so you can email me as well. I just put my email address in the chat. It's Allison, the way it's spelled on the screen, at LegalEase, which is EASE, consulting.com. Or you can always find me on LinkedIn. I don't think there's any other Allison Johs, Johs, in order to find me on LinkedIn. But that's always a good place to reach out to me.
Thank you. And how about you, Patrice? Where can our listeners connect with you further?
For email, call, you can go to lawcompany.com. I won't try to spell out my name. Answering Legal, you can give anybody who needs to have my email. You can call me on my cell phone. I take phone calls all the time, lawcompany.com. I talk to prospective clients all the time. Sometimes it goes somewhere, sometimes it doesn't. I oftentimes give away lots free. I mean, I'm happy to chat with you for as long as you need. And a lot of times that doesn't turn out to be a client relationship, and that's fine too. So I'm happy for any communication. I would want to throw in one more thing. If you're really thinking about doing something like that, Google how to write a mission statement. And write a mission statement. It'll help guide you.
Well, that is all the time we have for this discussion. I would like to thank Allison Johs, Elizabeth Warren, and Patrice Asimakis for joining me today.